Welcome to the interview where we try to get behind the headlines to understand what's really going on in America. One of our country's own was killed and another remains fighting for his life after an ambush in D.C. The fatal shooting triggered an abrupt shift in immigration policy under Donald Trump's administration. Asylum decisions are now frozen and visa processing for foreign nationals coming from so-called countries of concern has been halted. At the same time, reports surface of a controversial strike in the Caribbean, allegedly ordered by Pete Hegseth, adding more heat to questions about military orders, oversight, and the rule of law. Plus, peace talks to end the war in Ukraine. Joining us now, former FBI Special Agent Ken Gray. Thank you so much, Ken, for being with us and talking with us about all of these matters. Let's begin with this question of what happened in D.C. Obviously, it's tragic, it's heinous, it's horrible. We're very sad to see that 2 Guards members were targeted, that one lost their life, that another is critically injured. However, is this change in immigration warranted beyond, say, Afghan nationals?
Glad to be with you, Hillary. So as we have discussed in the past, during the Biden administration, the southwest border was wide open, and we don't know who came into the country during that period of time. Consequently, there may be other people here in the country that are planning to conduct some type of terrorist type operation against the United States that may be lying in wait, waiting for an order to go. And so whether this individual, Mr. Lachenwall, that traveled across the country from Washington State all the way to Washington, D.C. To shoot 2 National Guardsmen, 2 blocks away from the White House. He may have been actually intending to get to the White House to try to get into the White House grounds, possibly. This shows that we do not know who the people are that came into this country as part of the Operation Allies Welcome. When the United States fled Afghanistan, a large number of Afghans came with the U.S. to the United States because it was too dangerous for them to remain behind due to cooperating with the United States. But we don't know if everybody that came into this country with that group, and it was somewhere south of 90,000, 87,000, I believe, that came into the country. Not every one of those were properly vetted, and so to come into the country. So we don't know who they are, and I think that the idea of vetting the Afghans who came in under that program is a good idea, but I think it's also a good idea to take a strong look at who we can find that cross the border that might be a threat to this country also.
So that leads us to the question of remigration, or sending people back who have now legal status. You know, the problem there is, how do you decide who might be a threat to the country? How would you remigrate? That the administration has been very hesitant to define what remigration would mean in a practical sense. And Kristi Noem, even this morning, in speaking to the media, wouldn't give any details about what that would look like. What would it look like to you?
So if the administration hasn't come forward with their plan for doing that, I'm not going to suggest one to them, but I do think re-immigration might be an appropriate step. A lot of the people that came into this country came in under the guise of political asylum. But with political asylum, you're supposed to stop at the first country that you cross into that would grant asylum to you. And instead, most of the people that came north under this were actually economic refugees coming to the United States. And we don't have a process for allowing them to come into this country. We actually have a system to control who immigrates to the United States, and none of these people did that. So the idea of sending them back is a good idea, but how we go about doing that, I don't have a clue. And I don't think this current administration has put together a good plan to do that. But nonetheless, they are doing so now with those that are criminals that were here illegally, that may have been previously in the country, had been sent out of the country and returned illegally back to the country and may have committed crimes. either in this country or in their own country before. Those are the ones that we have been successful in sending back so far. But whether that process can be extended to the vast number that came across our border when it was wide open, I don't know.
Going back to Lochinwall, the suspect here who allegedly shot these two Guards members, he was, according to the reporting that's out there and according to Kristi Noem, was part of a CIA-backed paramilitary group in Afghanistan and therefore was an ally of the United States at some point and was fighting on our behalf, and then was basically pulled out of Afghanistan in 2021 and allowed entry into the United States, and allegedly was vetted at that time to come to the country because of what he had done in Afghanistan on behalf of the U.S. military, U.S. intelligence forces, we should say. So that vetting, you would think, would be relatively involved. What would that process have looked like? Did it clearly fail, or did something happen after Lochinwall came to the United States where he was radicalized here?
So, according to Joe Kent, the head of the National Counterterrorism Center, he said that the vetting for people working with the U.S. over in Afghanistan was a different level of vetting than that for a person that would be relocated to the United States. But in the chaos involved in our pulling out of that country, a lot of people came into the country with only the vetting that they had received to work with the U.S. there in Afghanistan. Additionally, there has been information come to light that that in some cases backgrounds were being actually bought to be used for vetting purposes. And so that is why there is a review underway at the moment for all those who came in under the Operation Allies Welcome to, at least they've started that review process, to determine exactly who they are and to try to establish some level of vetting for them to see whether or not there are potential threats in that group. As it is, I believe that 55 had been identified as being of concern and having been removed or in the process of being removed.
Yeah, right now, the section of the Immigration and Nationality Act that's being cited is 212F, and the president is using his power to be able to pause any entry of aliens into our country that could be threatening to our national security. But that is a very broad brush to paint with. And theoretically, it might be difficult to assign a threat or a potential threat to many of the immigrants who've come into our country or may come into our country seeking asylum or are here just for a better life or may even be highly skilled professionals like pathologists or, other types of physicians, chemists, et cetera. So what kind of criteria can be used to sort through the vast number of immigrants coming to our country? And there are those on the Democratic side who are saying these countries that have been designated countries of concern, it's a question of poor countries, it's a question of third world countries, and countries that are ethnically non-white. Are those valid concerns?
So you don't have to be a terrorist yourself to be a threat to the country. That is, look at the Somalian population there that we've just learned has been heavily involved in fraud and taking the fraud proceeds and sending it back. That is potentially funding al-Shabaab. And so you can be engaged in material support for terrorist groups without being a threat yourself as far as conducting an act of terrorism. And those would be legitimate individuals to remove from the country if they are engaged in material support of a terrorist group.
How do you determine that, though? I mean, the Immigration and Nationality Act does not necessarily stipulate anything beyond, as I said, that these aliens coming from countries of so-called concern might be a threat to national security. How do you determine if someone is a substantial threat to national security when clearly, qualitatively, you might say that there's almost no difference between this and what might amount to a permanent pause from countries that are third world. Is that the right thing for Americans to do? Is this the right message it sends to the world? And does this signal a shift in our policy that maybe we can't walk back from?
So we actually have a control of who comes into this country, or we did have at one point a process to determine who we were going to grant entry into this country, and that collapsed when they let the southwest border be wide open. And so a large number of people came into this country without going through that process of determining whether or not they added value to the country, and were relocated in various places around the country here and being supported around this country. We need to get back to the point where we actually control who we allow into the country to live here within the United States. And so the fact that they are starting to reestablish those rules does not mean that we are engaged in any kind of special actions against individuals based upon their color or point of origin. What we are actually doing is reestablishing our immigration laws.
Yeah, but the Supreme Court did give the Trump administration in Trump v. Hawaii a pretty broad ability to apply 212F, but it can't at the same time at all overturn or supersede the asylum-seeking capabilities that immigrants would have under INA 208. And so there are many scholars who are looking at this saying that if you're coming here seeking asylum, that you can go through the process and be considered legally, even though the president has said there's a pause. Do you see that? Do you see all asylum as being shut down? Does 212F supersede, or do you think that asylum seekers will still have an opportunity, even under this extant pause?
I don't have an answer for you on that. What I can say is that those people who have come into this country during the period of our wide open border and were given dates to go before an immigration court, that they are legitimate political asylees, people seeking political asylum, or if they are here for economic asylum, which is a completely different matter and can be ruled not to validly be in this country. And so I think that review process will be expedited, and you will see a lot more people being expelled from the country because they're not legitimate political asylee requesters.
All right, I want to transition to these strikes on drug boats, including in the Caribbean. There's a report that's out from the Washington Post that Pete Hegseth ordered a second strike against a boat after the first strike had been ordered, and that second strike was to eliminate two other survivors who were there. Now, Hegseth completely denies this, and several Congress members are backing him up until we can have more information. But in the meantime, we are seeing some political leaders coming forward and saying members of our military should be able to disobey what they believe are unlawful orders, and that there's clearly precedent for that. What kind of risks does that pose for members of the military? I know you served in the military. And is it right for politicians to come out and say this? I mean, they are just stating what is the law in the country, are they not?
Yeah, but this, the seditious six, the so-called seditious six here, have put together a very well-crafted video where they are implying that illegal orders are being asked upon the military members, and that the military should refuse to conduct any type of actions that are illegal orders. Well, under the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, you're not allowed to carry out any type of action that is an illegal order. So that goes without saying it. But when you put together this type of thing that is trying to recruit military members to act on their own against the orders that they are being given, this really crosses the line into sedition. Of the 6 members of Congress that did this, Mark Kelly is the one that is exposed. By that, I mean he's a naval commander, retired naval commander, but nonetheless, he's still under the UCMJ in certain instances. And if he is, remember, this is the commander who was recently an astronaut. And by his taking part in this, he is really exposed as to his actions here, and he could be prosecuted under the UCMJ for making this kind of statement, implying that servicemen should disobey orders by the president.
But do you really think, as President Trump has stated, that this video constitutes sedition that is punishable by death?
So I think that this is really a potential color revolution tool. That is, under the color revolution, you establish authority, you introduce looming threats, and then you frame resistance as the moral imperative to resist. That's not mine. That was Victor Davis Hanson who put together that list of things that fall under the process of carrying out a color revolution. And color revolutions have been conducted outside the country by our intelligence community in other countries. And this, a couple of these members that made this tape, including Senator Alyssa Slotkin, was former CIA. Right. And so this could very well be an attempt to do a color revolution, or to start one. I've been of the belief that we are seeing the beginning of attempts to have a color revolution here in the United States, and this is just one more act like that would support it.
Well, but that would have to be coordinated, very well coordinated by a number of actors. These are 6 people who are stating the law. How do you see that? How do you see that as amounting to what you've described?
Yeah, I think that by trying to raise questions about the actions of the president here to the public, they are conspiring to commit sedition here. At least that is one possible interpretation. The other side of the coin is that they are exercising their First Amendment rights to hold these opinions. The FBI said that they are going to request to do interviews about what was the intent in this case. There's no way to compel them to actually be interviewed by to allow an interview by the FBI. And that does have chilling effect upon First Amendment rights. But as I say, Mark Kelly may not be as well covered by just claiming it's First Amendment.
Yeah, and there is a difference that in evaluating the UCMJ and its ability or the ability maybe given to members of our military to disobey clearly illegal actions and maybe to disobey a strategy overall that they believe to be illegal in total. And those are 2 very different things. There is also, if we're talking about some kind of operation, military members theoretically could consult legally and find out, what grounds they have maybe to disobey. But I mean, this is really, really tricky because we are talking about 2 very different things, right?
Yes, we are talking about 2 very different things. And so, when this is being used to address the public to try to encourage them to resist against the current administration, that echoes back to when President Obama ordered the reassessment of the Russiagate era and that the threat by the Russians to try to hamstring the Trump administration before. And so is this another attempt to hamstring the Trump administration during this administration? That is one possibility, is that this is part of the color revolution to try to stop the current Trump administration. It's quite distressing to see senators do this without pointing out a single example of an illegal order. Instead, they imply that there's potential illegal orders that are being.
But to be fair, I didn't see any implication. They were stating the law. It was a video stating what the law is. I saw absolutely no implication or inference that the law has currently been violated. Now, I mean, one could make that reference, but I don't think there was anything within the video that suggested that. Can you point to any phraseology that you believe suggests that?
Yeah, the inference to me is that when senators get together like this and put out a video saying, do not obey illegal orders, the inference there is that there have been illegal orders or that there will be illegal orders. Under the UCMJ, of course, all servicemen are expected to not obey illegal orders. The Nuremberg defense, just because somebody orders you to do something, that doesn't mean that you have to follow it if it's an illegal order. So that's understood. But nonetheless, when you have a number of senators and congressmen that are putting out a video that are saying do not obey illegal orders, this is using their position of authority to try to convince people that there are illegal orders out there.
Yeah, there's a possibility, especially because there have been so many boats targeted in the Caribbean, that potentially we could see war crimes inquiries into what the United States is doing there. Now, of course, the United States rejects the ICC and its jurisdiction to have any sort of claim over what they're doing there. But that is a potential that we might be facing as the United States. I mean, that's not just a credibility issue, but one that certainly could put us in a very bad position diplomatically. Do you see a concern there?
So the ICC has no authority inside countries that have an established legal system that can bring things before a court. So I see that as not being a problem as far as criminal charges being brought about from them. But I will grant you that by designating cartels as a terrorist organization, that opened up the possibility of using the military to interdict against their actions, to include these drug boats, the narco-terrorists bringing drugs into the United States. But that normally was a law enforcement duty. The U.S. Coast Guard interdicts drug boats all the time and stops them, seizes their cargo, arrests the people on board. But instead, by calling the cartels a foreign terrorist organization, it opens up the possibility of using the military to conduct kinetic actions against these drug boats, which they have. 20 boats have been destroyed so far, and about 83 deaths have been involved also. They have legal precedents here to allow them to conduct these operations, but that has not been brought before the Supreme Court. My guess is the next thing that you will see is a challenge to designating the cartels as a foreign terrorist organization with that particular matter in mind, is the way that it is being processed. By conducting military strikes against what normally would have been a criminal organization conducting criminal operations will potentially be reviewed.
All right, let's talk about the war in Ukraine. Talks are currently ongoing, and there's some reporting that the negotiation, or that the United States has at least put forward a framework by which the front lines would be frozen basically where they are as they stand today, that there would be a long-term armistice, and that there would be some protection from the West, although not NATO membership, which Russia has continued to push against, and which seems to be a red line for Russia. If that is the framework that is eventually put on the table and agreed to by both parties, do you see that as a win for Ukraine, Russia, or both?
So if Russia manages to hold on to territory that they have grabbed so far, and and Ukraine ends up giving up that part of their country, then Russia is a winner in that outcome. But nonetheless, there's been an awful lot of Ukrainians who have died in this conflict. There are a lot of deaths on both sides, but the Ukraine has a lot less people to lose in this war, and so by accepting the loss of those that part of their country and coming to peace terms, I think that is a win on both sides from that aspect. The problem is that it may be just giving a pause for Russia to increase their manpower and increase their weapon systems to take another go at it a couple of years from now.
Yeah, the problem is that this would mean that Russia would be able to keep territory that it seized after February 2022, and under UN charters, the West would then tacitly be accepting aggressive annexation by Russia, which from a normative perspective could be very problematic if we're looking at other potential wars of aggression. Could that be a very dangerous precedent set by the West and the United States if they are the architects of this alleged deal?
So, you know, the loss of territory is going to be hurt Ukraine, but at the same time, Ukraine it continues to be hurt by the loss of all the people. So this might be the best possible deal for Ukraine at this point. You know, this war is going on far too long, and there are losses on both sides, and Ukraine is not able to take back the territory that they've lost so far. So what do we do? Continue at a stalemate with the continued losses on both sides, or call for this cessation of hostilities here and hold where they are currently at? I think that President Trump wants to have a peace agreement come out of this sooner rather than later. If Ukraine wants to continue trying to pursue this war, they may be doing so without the United States backing them.
There's also some reporting that China has been involved and that Moscow is consulting diplomats from Beijing, and maybe China wouldn't be considered necessarily an official party, but perhaps a guarantor. And if the West decides to have some sort of framework in which China is at least back-channeling and involved in that, aren't we institutionalizing China on the world stage as being maybe more influential than the West would like in coming to these conclusions? And then we have to think about, obviously, China and its own aggression towards Taiwan in the wake of whatever settlement is drawn up.
Absolutely. But again, what is the alternative? To have Ukraine continue trying to regain the ground that they have lost so far, because they haven't been able to do so. They're pretty much where they were from 2 years ago.
Okay. All right. That's a fair point. How long do you think it'll be before we actually see some sort of resolution with Ukraine and Russia? What timeline?
I don't have a crystal ball, and I would not hazard a guess. I know that President Trump wants to do a deal sooner rather than later. So my guess is, if I were to hazard a guess, I would say it's going to be a month or 2 months from now that they will end up coming to terms. But it really depends a lot on whether or not President Zelensky is willing to accept all the terms as it is right now, or if he will try to change the plan somehow, which may cause them to go back to renegotiation. I think that President Putin is more or less in the power seat as far as this deal goes, and that it would be to his advantage to delay it as much as possible for him to grab even more territory.
Okay. All right. Well, Ken Gray, we appreciate it. I know we always ask you in many interviews to be omniscient and looking at timelines, so we appreciate you speculating somewhat. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your Sunday afternoon. And to all of you out there, you also have a great Sunday. We'll see you next Sunday at 4:30.